Welcome to episode 252 of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent Charles Cunningham, who served in the FBI for 22 years. Charlie's first assignment was to the Albany Division, where he was responsible for liaison and investigations occurring in 3 northern New York counties. In this episode, Charlie reviews his investigation of military hero David Lindsay for cocaine trafficking. Lindsay was a highly decorated war hero who had retired from the military after 21 years in the Marine Corps and the Army. As reflected on his official DD-214 military record, Lindsay had earned more than 20 medals for bravery because of his combat missions, and as a former POW, his medical evaluation determined he suffered from a severe case of post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, and he used this claim as his defense during a jury trial. After working this case, Charlie was reassigned to the New York office where he worked organized crime and was selected to work for several years with the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, targeting Mexican cartels, before being promoted to supervise his own Colombian drug squad in Miami, Florida. Later in his career, Charlie was promoted to Assistant Special Agent in Charge, ASAC, of the New Orleans Division, and was named the Section Chief of Violent Crimes and the Organized Crime Section at FBI headquarters. Charlie received the FBI's Meritorious Medal of Bravery when he pulled a woman from a burning car collision while commuting to work. Charlie's last bureau assignment was as the Special Agent in Charge of the Richmond Division. After retiring from the FBI, he worked as the security director of several companies and agencies. Now Charlie is fully retired, living in Thailand, and writing a book about the David Lindsay cocaine trafficking investigation and trial, and a few of his other cases. This is an unbelievable case review. Make sure you stick around for the dramatic conclusion. I want to dedicate this episode to Canyon, my big old yellow lab mix, who recently passed away at the age of 12. You knew him. He made himself known, providing background audio in many episodes. Rest in peace, Canyon. In his honor, in my monthly email to Reader Team members, I have selected the family movie Show Dogs to review for FBI policy and procedural accuracy. Yes, this movie, featuring talking animals, is also an FBI movie. Make sure to check your spam filter and promotions tab if my February email hasn't shown up in your inbox. Of course, I want to welcome new listeners. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there are links to where you can buy me a coffee, visit my website to learn about my nonfiction and crime fiction books, and to join my reader team to keep up to date on the FBI in books, TV, and movies. Thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, Charles Cunningham. Hey, Charlie, how are you?
Hi, Jerry. Thanks very much for allowing me to do this with you.
Oh, this is a lot of fun, especially since you're all the way in Thailand and there's a 12-hour difference, but we've been able to make this work.
Yeah, you're right.
One of the things that I think listeners have picked up on is that as brand new FBI agents, they've got to be ready to hit the ground running. There is a training period and a training agent, but we hire people who have a lot of experience because we want to be able to hand them cases and they just go with it. And definitely that was the situation you were put in right when you began your career.
That's right. Yeah, I really enjoyed the academy and everything, but as soon as I got to Albany, it was ready to go.
You were really given a challenge because the case that we're going to talk about today was one where you were going against the town hero, a highly decorated military hero, and you were investigating him for drug trafficking. The challenge is on.
Jerry, this story was exciting and probably the most dramatic for me. Just to tell you the basics of it, the case involved a drug dealer operating upstate New York. He was alleged to be violent and intimidating. He recruited young girls and boys between the ages of 17 to 20 years old to sell his cocaine. The thing that made him different, he was a Vietnam War hero, a Green Beret, Ranger. The book I'm trying to put out there, the title was Pied Piper of Whitehall, and that was chosen only because the assistant U.S. attorney called him that in a newspaper interview. That was my first assignment in the FBI. After graduating from the FBI Academy, I was assigned to the Albany, New York division. Albany is the main office, and they have 7 satellite smaller offices. They were in Binghamton, Ithaca, Utica, Syracuse, Plattsburgh, Burlington, Vermont, and Rutland, Vermont. The smaller offices were called, as you know, resident agencies or RAs. When you arrive at your first office in the FBI, you must go through like a 6-month probationary period. Every agent is assigned a senior agent to oversee all your work for those first 6 months. So after my probationary training, I was assigned to 3 northern counties in upstate New York, Warren, Washington, and Saratoga. They were more rural than like a big city like Philadelphia or New York. And I was the only agent assigned to working those 3 counties. No agent had been assigned to those 3 counties for approximately 10 years before I was being assigned. So I asked my supervisor why he chose me to do this. He said, because of my past law enforcement experience. And Jerry, I'm a former military MP. I was a local police officer in Pennsylvania, and I was a Pennsylvania state trooper. He said that he would like for me to establish a liaison and build rapport with these other agencies. So my job was to contact the largest police agencies in those counties, introduce myself, offer them FBI services if they need it, and be a willing partner on anything they had going up there. But the bottom line was to establish a connection with them. And of course, handle any other cases. So I knew what to do, and I started immediately. I identified the largest police departments and sheriff's offices along with the New York State Police and started my mission. You won't believe this, Jerry, with a dozen donuts and my business card. It was funny. I mean, can you imagine? None of these agencies have seen an FBI agent in their counties in 10 years. Suddenly, the spanky new FBI agent pulls up in the Buick car and walks into their offices with some donuts. I knew they were not, going to just open the door for me either. I was going to have to work at it.
I bet they're a little suspicious. Who's this guy? Why is he here? What does he want?
Exactly. So it would take me several months with me going back every week to show them that I was for real. But eventually I made some good friendships, which led to one of the most dramatic cases that I've had in my career. And this is it. One day in April, senior investigator Jim Babcock for the New York State Police contacted me and asked me to stop to see him. Jim had never called me directly, only this one time. So I knew this was important. I drove to the Glens Falls State Police Barracks to meet with Jim the next day. When I arrived, they waved me into the back room. So I entered Jim's office and sat down. As he opened his desk drawer, he pulled out a black marble notebook, Jerry, and like we had in grade school. Investigator Babcock tells me the story of how he came to have this notebook. He told me that a young married couple, about 20 years old, had arrived the day before and told him a story. They admitted selling cocaine since the age of 17 for a man from Whitehall, New York, named Lindsay. They claimed they had filled the notebook over the past 3 years with drug transactions. And as 2 of Lindsay's principal sellers, they recorded every sale of cocaine, quantity, the date, the cost, who purchased the cocaine, and how much money was provided to David Lindsay. So Babcock asked the husband and wife team why they were doing this. Why are you turning this notebook into the police? And he said, do you understand that you're admitting being drug dealers, that you could go to jail? They both said to Babcock, it would certainly be better than being dead. And we want you to know, if we are found dead, you know who did it.
Wow.
David Lindsay. Yeah. So Babcock asked, as he threatened you? And the 2 husband and wife team, their names were Tanya and John. And so Tanya says, yes, he threatened to kill us. He even tried to lure my husband up to the quarry using some friends of ours, but they said Lindsay might be planning to kill John. So John didn't go. Jim had heard of the owner of DJ's Lounge, which is David Lindsay. And there were stories of Lindsay being a person nobody in the town wanted to mess with, as he had a violent reputation. But why did Babcock decide to call me on this case? So investigator Babcock told me that Lindsay was well known in the community. He had many followers from local police to state police and other community leaders, aware of his Vietnam War record. As a result, many people either respected him or feared him for his actions in Vietnam. Investigator Babcock told me that there was no way this case could have been worked at the state or local level, and stated it needed to be a federal case. Too many people may protect this guy. That is why Jim said he thought I would be the best choice to handle this investigation. One of the first things I did was send this notebook, Jerry, to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, where they had this remember the racketeering section that could cull through records and assemble them into a readable, actionable document. When I got the notebook back, it was displayed on like a spreadsheet and had every person's name, nickname, or code word associated with that person. In addition, the notebook identified each date they purchased drugs, the quantity sold or purchased on each occasion, including the total amount sold and purchased by each person. And in addition, it identified the total volume of cocaine distributed during that time by Lindsay's group, which amounted to numerous kilograms of cocaine. The notebook was prepared, Jerry, over a 3-year period, according to Tanya and John. I was just getting started with the notebook and John and Tanya. I had the records linking the primary drug dealer's source of cocaine, how much cocaine he had dealt over that 3 to 5 year period, and who the customers and other dealers had been. And usually, Jerry, you gain that information throughout a drug investigation with search warrants, affidavits, wiretaps, things like that, but not at the beginning of a case. So this notebook and testimony from Tanya and John, a little bit of legwork, and this guy, David Lindsay, would, I'm sure, be going down. This is one of the first cases I would have in the FBI, and it would be significant. I had this intimidating and threatening cocaine dealer who just happened to be this Vietnam War hero. Wow, for me, right? So I went back to the FBI office in Albany. I began the process of opening an investigation, sitting down with my supervisor to get some pointers from here, because again, this is one of the early cases I had as an FBI agent. I had many cases as a state trooper and things like that, but this was the first with the FBI. So I met with the assistant U.S. attorney. As you know, we sit down with them and get together from that point forward, because now we're going to be working this case together throughout the span of the case. I didn't have a team of people assigned to assist me. I'm assigned to the 3 counties by myself. The case was going to be using more of a historical structure, which means we already had a notebook. We had people who would testify. So it would be more telling the story, interviewing people, and getting them to cooperate with us from the notebook that identified all the personnel who were selling and distributing cocaine for Lindsay. Instead of a normal structure where you put things together, it's more of looking backwards.
So you didn't have a plan to do any drug buys or any type of wire or electronic surveillance? You were just going to go on the interviews that you were going to do with people who had already dealt with him?
Normally, that's the way it would go, Jerry, but I would try to work with Lindsay, as I'll tell you in a little bit. I did work with him to try to do things, but it'll come out as I tell this story a little bit. So for clarity, FBI agents typically are assigned a caseload of some 30 or 40 cases, you may remember, Jerry, right, of various federal violations. So I was assigned some old unsolved bank robbery cases, a handful of background investigations with deadlines, in addition to other cases that might include corruption, frauds, interstate transportation crimes, or violent crimes. So I was working on other matters while I was working the Lindsay case. So what was the Lindsay case about? Lindsay appeared to be a hero gone rogue. He had ruined a town by involving many youths in using and selling cocaine. Some would be destroyed for the rest of their lives. He recruited, intimidated, and abused dozens of people. They feared him and he threatened everyone. But Lindsay knew who to use and who to abuse. He used the police and community leaders and abused anyone working for him selling his cocaine. Lindsay had distributed many kilos of cocaine and made hundreds of thousands of dollars, but was a terror to the community. So he had to be stopped and he had to go to jail. I did the basic investigative steps. I ran criminal histories on all the names in the notebook, Lindsay's name, Tanya and John's, and dozens more, but only a few had any criminal record. And I thought that was rare, but maybe it was genius by Lindsay for taking young people who may not have had a history.
Before he got the notebook, did senior investigator Babcock had any suspicion or any knowledge about Lindsay being involved in drug distribution?
I'll go into a few things, but he had told me that Lindsay was known by a lot of people. He was a local hero and people knew him, but he didn't have knowledge that like this, that he was selling cocaine like this. No, he told me that state troopers had drank at his bar and things like that. People knew him and heard of his stories.
His war stories, but not of his stories connected to drug dealing.
Right.
That's interesting that he was able to keep under the radar even as a well-known military hero.
Yes.
I guess that's why, because no one would ever suspect him of being involved in this type of illegal activity.
Right. That's part of it, definitely. And I'll say something about that. But yeah, you got it. I went back to speak to Investigator Babcock to get more details about Lindsay. And Jim said everybody knew him, that he was a local hero who had served in the Marines and the Army before being honorably discharged after more than 20 years. Babcock said Lindsay received many medals and some were massive awards. He said Lindsay was a Special Forces, Green Beret, and Ranger soldier who served like 5 tours in Vietnam. In addition, he said people were told stories of him working on covert missions with the CIA. Babcock said that I would have difficulty investigating him. He also said there were stories that Lindsay walked the streets of Whitehall in the early hours of the morning with a shotgun to protect the town. Others thought he was just having a Vietnam flashback. However, the local police, state police, sheriff's office knew him. They drank in this bar and knew Lindsay's history. He told me to be careful that he had people protecting him. I was starting to get the picture of Lindsay. He was the local kid turned hero, acting as the protector, but clearly he was doing some illegal things. And his reputation and background, they seemed to be protecting him. Investigator Babcock also told me that Lindsay took no BS from anybody. And there were stories of Lindsay pistol whipping people at his bar called DJ's Lounge. However, Lindsay was known to handle things himself. Others spoke about Lindsay firing guns, threatening people with serious bodily harm. There were even rumors of Lindsay having killed several people, but nobody ever brought charges against him, despite people being beaten badly, and police were not forcing anyone to speak up either. There had been no incidents reported at Lindsay's bar, but other bars had incidents happening almost every week. Bars are renowned for having problems, and that stuck in my head. All these other bars have problems and not this bar. So I thought I would start with the local chief of police and see what he would say about Lindsay. I made an appointment. I met Chief Bruce Angus, but did not reveal any information about the notebook I had. I only wanted a local feeling about DJ's Lounge and Lindsay. So I told Angus the same thing I said to the other agencies in Washington County and the other counties. I told him I was there to help if needed. I asked him what kind of issues they had in Whitehall. Chief Angus said they had no problems in Whitehall. He said it was a small town. Pretty much everybody knew everybody. I pushed him by asking if there was any drug trafficking that Angus knew. He said there was no drugs in Whitehall and that primarily existed in the bigger towns of like Ticonderoga, Glens Falls, and Saratoga. He also noted that Rutland and Burlington, Vermont had problems with drugs. So I asked him if there were any bars in the town with any issues. He said they only had one bar in the town called DJ's Lounge, but no drugs were sold there. I asked him who owned the bar. That might have been too much to ask Chief Angus. He said a Vietnam hero named David Lindsay owned the bar, and there was never any problems at the bar, as Lindsay would not allow anything illegal to go on there. I asked that Chief Angus if Lindsay could be doing anything illegal. Chief Angus snapped back, no, absolutely not. As soon as I walked out of the police department, I did not feel right, Jerry. And I'm sure you felt this throughout your career as well.
Yeah, you could feel his defensiveness. He was very defensive.
Yes. And I felt that Chief Angus was hiding something. It was the beginning of the feelings I would get in this case. And because of my background in law enforcement, Jerry, I had developed another sense kind of thing that we call sixth sense, something more significant than just awareness, that next level. And I called it this max realization that something bad could happen. I think we all have it. Some just don't heed the signs when they're there. Within 3 hours, I received a call from the FBI office. The dispatcher told me David Lindsay had called and wanted to speak to Agent Cunningham. He said, Agent Cunningham was just in Whitehall asking questions about me, and I would like to meet with him. Well, Jerry, you know, this is not how I would have expected the investigation to.
No, that means that the chief, as soon as you walked out of there, must have gone to him and told him you were asking questions.
Exactly. The chief of police, I believe, had contacted Lindsay and informed him that the FBI was just there asking questions about him. As this was out of the ordinary, I felt like, boy, I should talk to AUSA McCann and tell him about this right now. The chief of police had obviously called Lindsay after my meeting and told him I had been asking questions. I asked McCann what he thought. I wanted to meet with this guy. I asked McCann if he had any issue with me meeting Lindsay, and McCann was a great AUSA. He was the head of all narcotics investigations in the Albany FBI office, handling all DEA cases and things like that. And he said it would be good, go ahead. But he told me one thing. He just said, don't ask him any questions. Just let him do all the talking. I arranged a meeting with Lindsay, went to a hotel parking lot with a New York State trooper as a witness to sit in the car with me. He said he would pull up in a red sports car, and he arrived a few minutes after 11. Lindsay rolled his window down and asked if I was Agent Cunningham. I nodded yes, and Lindsay climbed into the back seat of my car and immediately started talking about all the drugs that were sold in the Whitehall, New York area and other towns around Whitehall.
Wait a minute. Chief Angus told you that there were no drugs sold in Whitehall.
Exactly. Yeah. So all of a sudden, this guy, Lindsay, he's going to tell me about all the drug trafficking that's going on up there. As instructed, though, I did not ask any questions. I took notes of what Lindsay was saying. Lindsay named a few drug dealers operating in Ticonderoga, Rutland, Vermont, and Saratoga Springs. Lindsay said, I'm tired of all the drug dealing going on, and I know there are about 50 drug dealers currently operating in upstate New York. Lindsay did not stop talking, Jerry, for an hour, and I immediately understood that he was a manipulator and needed to control things. I felt that this was Lindsay. He likes to be the leader and in charge. I knew right away that Lindsay might be a problem, and probably everything out of his mouth would be questionable. It was a feeling I got and nothing that I could base anything on, just my senses. After listening to Lindsay and his monologue, I told him that I would have to get back to him with what we could do to go after some of these drug dealers.
His competition.
Yes, and that's exactly right. Never did Lindsay indicate that he was a drug dealer. Later, I met with the AUSA. I completed an FD 302 on the one-sided statement comments from Lindsay. And I told McCann that I felt Lindsay was a manipulator and possibly a liar. Immediately I asked him for permission to record every phone call with Lindsay due to my gut feeling. Jerry, in my whole career, I never recorded every phone call with a subject or a witness, only in very rare cases. I'm sure you might be the same way.
Absolutely. So these would be consensual phone calls with you being the consenting party.
Yes, exactly. As a result, the AUSA authorized me to record all my calls with Lindsay. Recording them proved very beneficial later at trial. About a week went by when I asked Lindsay to meet me at a local hotel in Lake George. Lindsay agreed again, and I had a state trooper accompany me this time also. The AUSA suggested that at this point, I read Lindsay his Miranda warnings and see if he would give up other drug dealers. We would not spend a lot of time on this case. And as I advised before, that this would probably be more historical in nature. I advised him, and we met in a hotel room, and I started with his Miranda warnings. I then told Lindsay that we had information that Lindsay was a cocaine dealer and he would be prosecuted. But if he helped set up other drug dealers, I told him I would help with a 5K letter submitted to the court when Lindsay was sentenced. as long as he did what I said. Lindsay stated that he was no longer using drugs, a lie, and he would help set up other drug dealers, another lie, and he would make drug purchases at my direction. Lindsay never asked what information that I had on him. I would write a report on what happened that day, and during this meeting, I never promised Lindsay immunity or anything like that. However, later on, Lindsay would testify at trial that he thought he was an FBI agent and that I gave him immunity. I said, what?
What?
Yeah. Over the next several months, I would meet with Lindsay and arrange to meet alleged drug dealers and put a recording device on Lindsay to gather incriminating information. But Lindsay's discussions always consisted of Lindsay dominating the conversation. Lindsay would do all the talking and speak about how he was not involved in drug distribution in Whitehall. And every meeting, I told Lindsay to allow the other people to talk and to find out where they got their drugs from. But he never did what I asked of him. So I felt like he was just trying to manipulate me, Jerry.
Absolutely. Plus, I'm sure he was really afraid of what they would say about him. He did not want that to be recorded.
Right. So I met with Lindsay on many occasions. He would talk to me about the military. He asked me, had I served? What did I do in the military? Had I been in combat? Lindsay would tell me stories of him being in special forces and a ranger doing recon missions in Vietnam. Lindsay told me stories of his team getting into firefights and how he had killed many Viet Cong guerrillas. Lindsay revealed that he had won the Navy Cross to me and the Distinguished Service Cross. He said he earned some silver stars, some bronze stars, several Purple Hearts, and that he had been a POW but had escaped. Lindsay told me one story, Jerry, of him after a recon mission. His team was on the way back to the main base where they encountered a team of friendly soldiers. He said he tried to signal them that they were Marines, but the other team started shooting at him and his team, and he had no choice. He said he had to return fire, and he told me that he killed the entire unit of friendly Marines.
Okay, wait
And he
a
said,
minute.
yeah.
I think that one is a little bit too much for anyone to believe, to say with a straight face. Until he got to that point, were you believing everything that he said? Were you suspicious? I mean, you were told that he was a military hero. Are you starting at this point to wonder if that is all true?
I am, but I have nothing to go on except that feeling kind of thing that you get when you're investigating something that just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. Something's quite not right, but how do you go about proving that? After that, every time I met him, he would tell me a story about him in special forces or entering Laos to do some covert mission with the CIA. I had no idea if he was telling me the truth. I also had no reason to think he was lying, except for that gut feeling. Lindsay's stories were so violent, and he was always the one to kill the enemy. I always thought he wanted to show me how easy it was for him to kill someone. Lindsay told me another story of him killing 71 VC in one battle after his team was attacked, and he had saved his team. I must admit I was impressed, but he had turned rogue by selling drugs and threatening people. He told these same stories to anyone who listened to him. And it was clear that Lindsay was not afraid of anybody, and he could kill anyone without hesitation. While I gathered information on David Lindsay, I learned that Donnie Lindsay, his son, committed suicide in 1985 with a shotgun blast to his chest. But the rumor in the town was that his father had killed him because he had owed him a large sum of money for cocaine that he used but did not pay for. Lindsay told people in the town that he thought another drug dealer had killed his son. It's possible the local police in Washington County did not look too deeply into this matter and quickly ruled the death a suicide. It was just a little suspicious, Jerry, as the Washington County District Attorney and his brother, a private practice attorney, had privately mortgaged Lindsay's house, but never registered the transaction. Why did they do that? It turns out just to be another unknown part of this story. About a year after Donnie Lindsay's, I learned of another death. A young drug distributor from Whitehall named David Dewey was found shot in the chest, like Donald Lindsay. The Washington County Sheriff's Office ruled that a suicide also. The people close to Lindsay knew Dewey was selling cocaine for Lindsay and owed him a lot of money. However, those working for Lindsay did not believe it was a suicide. People close to Lindsay only know that Donnie Lindsay and David Dewey sold drugs for Lindsay, and both ended up dead shot in the chest with a shotgun. One note about this is that Lisa Guitar was David Dewey's girlfriend at the time of his death. But shortly after Dewey's death, she became David Lindsay's live-in girlfriend and became his partner in his drug empire. As fate would have it, Jerry, I was reassigned to New York City, the largest FBI office, as they have a constant need for agents. I was excited to be going to New York, but I knew I would have to turn my case against Lindsay over to another agent upon my transfer. When I left Albany in 1989, the case was turned over to a senior agent to carry the rest of the way to the arrest and trial of Lindsay.
But it sounds like you had done most of the work and all that was left, which is still a major part, but what was left was the actual charging and trial.
That's right. I was a central piece of the Lindsay case, and I would be sent back to Albany as needed for the trial and discovery purposes. And Jerry, I would be grilled on the witness stand several times during the trial. On the day that David Lindsay was arrested, he had two comments. Lindsay yelled out, "Where is Charlie? This is not how we said this would go down. Where's Charlie Cunningham?" I traveled to the Albany, New York division to prepare for the discovery phase and the actual trial. I sat down with AUSA McCann when Lindsay was proffered a plea deal of 15 years. Lindsay declined the plea deal. He said it was not in his best interest, as he was already 50 years old at that point and thought that 15 years he would be old and wouldn't be his best interest. Instead, he wanted to go to trial.
Was he saying that he was not involved in drug dealing at all?
No, his defense would be to show that he was sick with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, a mental illness. His attorney basically says during the trial, he doesn't deny that he didn't sell the cocaine. That's all understood, that that's what happened.
Based on everything that he told you that he was involved in while he was in the military and all of the killing and the violence and the POW, if anybody's going to have PTSD, it would be David Lindsay. So
Right.
the defense is plausible. Doesn't excuse drug dealing, though.
It does not. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Before the case went to trial, AUSA Jack McCann and I were asked to meet with Judge Constantino Chalakis in his chambers. We entered the judge's office and he was sitting at his desk. And Jerry, behind the judge's desk on the wall was a large painting of the U.S. Marine Corps globe and anchor emblem. And you believe it? The judge was a former Marine in World War II. So he held Lindsay's DD-214 in front of us and said, "Did you two see this?" Jerry, I don't know if you were in the military, but a DD-214 is the official copy of any person in the military. And it was Lindsay's military record of medals and awards and training that was received. This is all disclosed on this one document called a DD-214.
I'm actually a military brat. My father was in the Air Force for 21 years, so I know all about DD-214. That's an official document. So a lot of the stuff that David Lindsay told you was actually on this form?
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes. And I'll get into a little bit about that. Judge Chalakis said, "This man is a real American hero. You two better be right." And then he said, "Okay, get out." We left his office in shock, unaware that the judge was a former Marine himself. And we just looked at each other. During the trial, Lindsay testified that I had offered him immunity in exchange for his assistance in identifying other drug dealers. I did not provide him immunity to Lindsay. Jerry, agents, we don't have that power, but it did not matter if he was lying. The defense lawyer grilled me on my duties as a special agent and asked questions after question about Lindsay being in the military and would only allow me to answer yes or no. As you know, you're not permitted to give these explanations. You answer the question with yes or no, and that's what the defense attorney was trying to get from me. So I was on the witness stand for hours at a time. And Jerry, this was my first time testifying in a federal courtroom. I had done it in the state level, but it's very different in the federal system. To give more of an answer to a question, I needed to wait for the prosecution to direct question me or cross-examine me and give me the opportunity to provide more complete answers. But sometimes testifying, Jerry, you know, is a grueling process and takes a lot of patience and self-control.
Absolutely.
The defense wanted to portray that I had given Lindsay immunity or to show that Lindsay said I gave him immunity. And then it is often just casting a shadow of doubt for the jurors. The defense wants to say I lied or failed to do something. Who does the jury believe? A young FBI agent or a Vietnam War hero? But if you ever must testify in a federal trial, especially in your early years, you will not feel well when you finish. The defense will try to besmirch your image and turn every word in any way that they can.
Yeah, during my career, I had many opportunities to be on the witness stand. It's challenging and sometimes it's not fun.
Right. I totally agree. So I prepared for the trial with the assistant U.S. attorney as I had initiated the investigation into Lindsay's cocaine operation. In addition, I'm the case agent Lindsay met with and had many meetings with before he was arrested and charged, in addition to recording our telephone calls. From the very beginning of the case, I felt that David Lindsay did not exhibit a hero's mindset. People I know who won medals for heroism were humble people, and they gave credit to others in their units, Jerry. Real heroes say that they were nothing special. But from the moment I met Lindsay, he was all about Lindsay. He spoke incessantly about what he did, how Lindsay saved his men, and how he took charge of a situation. That did not sit right with me, and I sensed something wrong about Lindsay from the beginning. However, it was only that feeling I had. I had no information or evidence that he was something other than a hero.
Plus, you had that DD-214 that
Exactly.
corroborated everything that he was saying.
Exactly. I thought from early on that we would need a military person to give us a rundown on Lindsay's military files. I felt we needed an expert from the U.S. Marines and the Army. The AUSA obtained copies of Lindsay's military files, though, and asked me to look through them. McCann said that he had reviewed his military records, but did not see anything to prove that Lindsay was not a hero. As I reviewed his files, I turned page after page, Jerry, of his record and was shocked at what I found. Everything he said was right in front of me in black and white and documented in his personnel file. I started with his Marine Corps record and read that shortly after he joined, he would receive the highest medal for heroism when not in combat. It's called the Navy Marine Corps Medal, while he was at Cherry Point, North Carolina. Reading directly from the citation about his actions that day, Lindsay was on guard duty when he saw a helicopter in distress and heard the engine struggling. Lindsay drove toward the flight line. He saw the aircraft in trouble, and Lindsay skidded to a stop as he saw the helicopter crash in a fuel depot. Fearless, Lindsay jumped out of his Jeep and ran toward the now burning helicopter. Lindsay got to the downed aircraft and immediately attempted to extract the pilot and co-pilot. Unfortunately, the helicopter was on its side and the doors were jammed shut. Lindsay kicked in the plexiglass windshield and was able to get access to the cockpit. Both pilot and co-pilot were unconscious. Lindsay quickly dragged the pilot and co-pilot from the crashed and burning helicopter. Lindsay was aware of other aircraft in the fuel depot, and he rushed back to the downed aircraft with a towing vehicle. He wrapped a 30-foot chain around the tail of the crashed copter and, risking his own life, dragged the burning chopper out of the fuel depot, saving other aircraft. Lindsay had single-handedly saved the two pilots, pulled the burning aircraft to a safe area, and protected millions of dollars of other aircraft. Jerry, I was shocked after reading this one heroic act. Lindsay was awarded the Navy Marine Corps Medal for heroism, the first of many valorous medals he would receive in the Marine Corps. I continued to flip through his military record and then came upon Lindsay's records in Vietnam in early 1962 and 63. According to his records, Lindsay also served in Lebanon and Cuba, which were expeditionary assignments. He would earn 10 overseas combat bars that he wore on his sleeve of his uniform that stood for his combat tours in Vietnam. Lindsay volunteered to go to Vietnam again in 1965, in 1966, 1969, and 1970, 1971, and 1972, during his time as a Marine and an Army soldier. As I continued to review his record, I saw that he was assigned to the Marine Corps recon units, which put Lindsay right in the middle of the fight in Vietnam. I then found that citation Lindsay earned for a Bronze Star with a V device for action Lindsay had in Vietnam. He also earned a Navy Commendation Medal with a V device in November of 1965 for bravery in another battle. In Lindsay's U.S. Army record, There was also a citation receiving the Navy Cross, the second highest medal, Jerry, just behind the Congressional Medal of Honor on the 23rd and 24th of December, 1965. In 1966, David Lindsay would be awarded additional valorous medals, a Silver Star, a Bronze Star with the V device, and several Purple Hearts. If there were any thoughts that Lindsay had not earned the medals that I heard about, along with the various stories, I thought there was no doubt now.
It's all there in black and white. What he said he did is there. He's a military hero and a drug dealer.
During the trial, Lindsay testified that he had spent 21 years in the military, with 11 years spent in the U.S. Marine Corps and 10 years in the U.S. Army. Lindsay's defense team asked questions about the medals Lindsay earned in Vietnam. Lindsay cited his valor awards on the stand: the Distinguished Service Cross, the Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Distinguished Flying Cross, 3 Air Medals, and 2 Vietnam Cross of Gallantries, 1 with a palm and 1 with a gold star, 5 bronze stars with V device, 4 commendation medals.
I have to ask you, what is this V device?
It's for valor, which meant you're under fire in combat.
Okay.
It's a very big difference when you receive the V device. You can earn a Bronze Star and a commendation medal for other things you do good in the services. Lindsay further stated he had been a prisoner of war in Vietnam, but was able to escape. Most people in the jury were seniors. Some had been in Vietnam or World War II, and they had only heard stories of Special Forces soldiers. Lindsay told them that he was a Ranger, Airborne, and a Special Forces Green Beret. Something to note here, Jerry. During prep to write a book on this, I found a person who studies military history. I sent him the DD-214, which listed all the medals that Lindsay had earned. He told me that Lindsay would have been the 15th highest ranked hero in history since the Revolutionary War for non-Medal of Honor recipients. Just removing Medal of Honor recipients out of it, he would have been the 15th highest for people who did not receive a Congressional Medal of Honor.
And the Congressional Medal of Honor is the highest military award that a soldier can receive.
Yes. As the trial started, the prosecution had identified approximately 30 people who would testify. It included what I call the sheep, the young people that Lindsay had recruited as the Pied Piper of Whitehall. As the trial started, the prosecution had identified approximately 30 people who would testify and included the sheep, the young people that Lindsay had recruited as the Pied Piper of Whitehall when he got into the cocaine business. These teenage girls and boys would sell cocaine at the Whitehall High School and Lindsay's bar. Lindsay provided them with the cocaine, told them what to charge, and Lindsay paid these youngsters with cocaine, not with money. And as a result, they became addicted to cocaine, and many were negatively affected throughout their lives. The fact that Lindsay took the stand and told the judge and jury about his valorous moments during the war in Vietnam had a profound effect that I could see in the jurors' faces and body language, for sure. In addition, the judge was a former World War II Marine himself, and he seemed to be allowing objections voiced by the defense and dismissed any objections from the prosecution. It was clear that the jury wondered why the prosecution was sort of persecuting David Lindsay if he was this hero. After all, the defense attorney submitted that Lindsay does not deny that he sold cocaine. Furthermore, the prosecution put about 30 witnesses on the stand who testified about Lindsay's violent behavior and how he intimidated and threatened them. While there was no proof that Lindsay had killed anyone, the entire town of Whitehall believed that Lindsay may have murdered several people. As a side note, Jerry, during the trial, the FBI learned that one of the prisoners being housed with Lindsay had come forward with information that Lindsay tried to recruit him to kill his son, Ronald Lindsay, and the assistant U.S. attorney. This information was never brought forward due to the ongoing trial, but David Lindsay had offered $10,000 each to murder McCann and Ronald Lindsay. The jury would never hear this information, and Lindsay would never be charged with this allegation.
Well, that's a pretty serious allegation. Here is the AUSA trying to try this case, and at the same time, he's being told that Lindsay's trying to get someone to kill him.
Yes, he was told that. It's pretty unbelievable, all the events that were occurring. As the trial continued, Lindsay was monitored and assessed by 2 3-man teams, like doctor teams, one from the prosecution side and one from the defense side. The prosecution psychologist all indicated that Lindsay did not have PTSD. And their information came mainly from studying veterans imprisoned at the Butner Federal Facility located in North Carolina. But the defense team of doctors had found that Lindsay absolutely suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. One of the psychiatrists, Jerry, Dr. Lawrence Cobb, KOLB, he was an expert in the field of PTSD and was one of the first to identify the old term of combat neurosis or combat fatigue, shell shock, to the new sickness that happened to soldiers in extreme wartime situations as PTSD. Dr. Cobb was the head of Columbia University Psychiatry Department and the head of psychiatry for the state of New York. He was also professor of psychiatry at Albany University Hospital. Dr. Cobb testified that one of the main factors for Mr. Lindsay's illness was his interaction with Agent Cunningham.
What? So he's been through all of this combat. He's been in Vietnam. He's a POW. He's done all of this. But you're the one who gave him PTSD.
Yeah, I'm the one who brought this forward. Dr. Cobb said Lindsay felt there was a trust factor between him and the agent, as Lindsay felt that he was working as a federal agent with the FBI, but that Agent Cunningham had not done what Lindsay thought he would do and help him, as Lindsay had helped the FBI. But this information was what Lindsay told the doctor, and not true. So Dr. Cobb testified he served in the Navy during World War II and had studied PTSD before it was called PTSD, and emphatically stated that David James Lindsay was the worst case of PTSD that he had ever seen, based on Lindsay's combat missions. Dr. Cobb thought Lindsay's medals of valor proved his exposure. That statement alone, Jerry, was potentially the nail in the coffin for the prosecution that I saw. According to this famous doctor of psychiatry, Lindsay was sick due to his Vietnam experiences. I felt that it did not matter how many people we put on the stand to testify against Lindsay, would do anything to alter the jury's mindset at that point. I believed that what we would get was a guilty by reason of insanity for Lindsay, and he would be sent to a federal mental institution for a few years and then be released. After all, that is what he was hoping for. He was hoping the jury would see that he was sick. I must go back now, Jerry, to one point in my review of Lindsay's military records, and the one thing that I saw that might change everything. I told you that I was blown away by all the medals and awards Lindsay received during his 21 years in the military. Were there right in front of me. The citations for valor, the DD-214, training documents, everything. But one thing that got my attention was when I was looking at Lindsay's Army record, was that I saw a copy of the Navy Cross citation in his Army record. I had already looked at his Marine Corps records and did not see the Navy Cross citation in the Marine Corps record. I went back to the Marine Corps records and looked again and did not see it. That one thing struck me as odd. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I looked for his most recent DD-214, the official document that confirms awards, training, and medals. In 1979, Lindsay was discharged from the military, and there it was, the Navy Cross, listed as a medal that had been awarded to David James Lindsay. So it must be a mistake that the citation was not listed in his Marine Corps record and only appeared in his Army records. So I went to AUSA in McCann. I told him what I had noticed, that something odd to me. Having been in the military myself, I knew that the DD-214 was the official document. So I told McCann that there was no Navy Cross in his Marine Corps records. So McCann looked through the file and also verified that the Navy Cross was not listed in his Navy record. So he thought, well, could it be a mistake? So I told McCann we needed to get someone from the military to verify his records. McCann was able to identify someone to contact at the Pentagon, but we were already in trial, Jerry. There's a unit that verifies awards and citations through the checks at the National Archives stored in Washington. Unfortunately, we did not hear from the Department of Defense, and the trial continued.
So now you're looking to verify the medals, but where did this DD-214 come from? It's an official document, isn't it? Did you get it from military records?
Yes, came from his file.
So it's not something that he gave to you or that you got during a search. It came from his military file.
Yes, the AUSA had contacted St. Louis, and we got copies of his entire files from the Marine Corps and from the Army.
And so there is really no reason for you to question it until you came to this strange thing that you
Well,
had a medal that he got when he was in the Marines, but it's not listed under the Navy Marine section. It's listed under the Army section.
exactly.
Other than that, you thought the records were valid. They were good.
I did.
All right. Well, this is getting kind of juicy.
It is. What I did not know was that a chief warrant officer from the Army had arrived and met with AUSA McCann the night before the trial ended. The next morning, closing arguments were to be given to the jury. I mean, Jerry, this is the 11th hour of this trial. While I did not know it, the Pentagon had contacted Jack McCann, and they were sending a military expert to testify about Staff Sergeant Lindsay's military record. Unknown to me was that a chief warrant officer from the Army had arrived with the critical information the night before. The next morning, I was sort of unaware of this last-minute witness. At the courthouse, I was in the gallery section, and Jack McCann saw me in the courtroom, and all he said was, "Wait until you see this." I didn't know what he was talking about and what was about to happen. I said, "What do you have?" He did not have time, and he just winked at me. As the judge entered the courtroom and the court officer called the room to order, McCann stated that he would like to call a witness. Well, Jerry, the defense attorney objected as the prosecution had already rested. But McCann said, "Judge, we were just notified about a witness who came to testify as a rebuttal witness to David Lindsay's military record." So the judge said to the prosecutor, "Okay, I will allow this, but let's get to it." McCann responded, "Yes, okay, Your Honor." So McCann called the Army chief warrant officer to the stand. The soldier took the stand wearing his dress uniform with medals displayed on his chest. Mr. Thomas Piatti was sworn in, and the AUSA asked him where he worked. Piatti said he worked in the authorization section of the Department of the Army, awards branch in Washington, D.C. McCann asked Piatti what his job was. Piatti stated, "My job is to adjudicate claims for awards dating back to the Civil War. I prepare and distribute posthumous awards to the next of kin of those killed in action, and I also investigate cases of fraud. I have access, by virtue of my credentials from the National Archives and Records Administration, to review records of the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Army records. No one knew what was about to happen except for maybe David Lindsay." Mr. Piatti was asked what he was there to do. Mr. Piatti said, "There's two things I'm going to do today." He said, first, he was going to testify about the military record of Staff Sergeant David Lindsay. And the second thing he was going to do was remove every medal from Lindsay's record that he did not earn. The jaws of the jury dropped to the floor, Jerry, including my own. I was in shock, but had a smile on my face. I looked at the judge, and he was in shock as he saw Lindsay's head dip toward the table. Until Piatti finished, the courtroom was like completely silent. Not a sound was heard except for Mr. Piatti discrediting each medal one at a time. I don't think anyone was breathing at that point. I know I wasn't.
Wow.
McCann continued questioning Piatti, and first up was Lindsay's claim of being a POW. Piatti stated that he searched the National Archive records of the prisoners of war, and there was no record of David Lindsay being a POW. That never happened. That was fraudulent, he said. The prosecutor asked about the Silver Star awarded to Lindsay while stationed in Vietnam in October 1965. Piatti stated that Lindsay was not in Vietnam in October 1965. That award was fraudulent. McCann asked about an award for a commendation medal with a V device in Vietnam in November of 1965. Piatti stated that Lindsay was in California in November of 1965 and that the medal was fraudulent. McCann asked about the Navy Cross, and Piatti stated that the Navy Cross was fraudulent and never earned by Sergeant Lindsay. Lindsay had earned the Navy Marine Corps medal in 1958 that I told you about for saving a pilot and co-pilot from a crashed burning helicopter. This medal was the highest valor award for a soldier earned during a non-combat period. Piatti stated that Lindsay was AWOL on the date indicated for that award in 1958, and no record existed for the award at the National Archives. That medal was fraudulent. The AUSA asked Piatti if Lindsay had received any valor awards during his 11 years in the Marine Corps. Piatti stated, no. Sergeant Lindsay did not earn any valor awards while in the United States Marine Corps. Next, McCann asked Piatti what Sergeant Lindsay's job or position was in the Marine Corps. Piatti stated that Lindsay was a chief administrative sergeant. He was a clerk. Piatti then described how Lindsay oversaw all the Marines' administrative records for the Marine company he was assigned to, including Lindsay's own file records.
Oh.
Piatti finished and was excused.
Wow. So you're telling me that everything on his DD-214 was inserted or written there by him?
Jerry, I know it's hard to believe, but this was at a time when there weren't computers and things that were able to be manipulated. This is the actual paper documents being manipulated and copied and his name inserted into these medals. Then he placed them in his file. It's not possible to get to these military records by the majority of people. But this guy, because he was the chief clerk, he had access to things that nobody had access to. He was getting the official citations and award notifications and then copying them and inserting his name into these.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I did not see that coming.
I didn't either. I'm telling you that if my jaw wasn't attached to the upper part, it would have been on the floor. So both sides gave their closing arguments. The jury in the courtroom still in total shock from the Piatti testimony. It was clear to me that the jury, due to Dr. Cobb's testimony, felt that Lindsay had PTSD based on all the battles he had been in and described in his medal citations. Lindsay was a true war hero in the jury's mind and was prepared to send him to a mental facility. I could feel it physically and see it in the jury's expressions. After the testimony from Chief Warrant Officer Thomas Piatti, had it shaken their resolve? The silence in the courtroom was deafening, and the jaw-dropping expressions might have done it. We would have to wait and see. I had been approached during the trial, Jerry, by some of my peers from the Albany FBI office, and they made comments like, "Charlie, this guy is a Vietnam hero. Why are you pushing this?" Others just gave me the cold shoulder and turned away when I was in their presence. I was still only operating on my gut feelings, what I called it my max realization, and just feeling Lindsay was not what he said he was. In addition, AUSA McCann had received the same treatment from the U.S. Attorney in Albany himself and other attorneys that Lindsay was a war hero.
And you both had received that treatment from the judge at the start of the trial.
Yeah. And they wanted to know, was the AUSA ethically pursuing this matter? After hearing Thomas Piatti, we both truly felt vindicated. I felt that my peers judged me wrongly. And Mr. Piatti told the true story about Lindsay, that he was a fraud, not the war hero he told everyone that he was. My opinion was that Lindsay displayed more narcissistic attributes that gave rise to his bullying behavior throughout his life. The court gave the jury their instructions, and they retired to make their decision. 2 days later, the judge called the courtroom to order, and the jury was seated. The foreman stood and told the judge that the jury had reached a unanimous decision. There were 21 total counts against Lindsay. The jury found Lindsay guilty on all counts. Mr. Piatti had made an enormous impact on this jury. Lindsay had accused me of lying, promising immunity from prosecution, and failing to be fair during the arrest and trial. It was personal, really, for me. My instincts of this max realization about Lindsay and what he had done to his town was shocking. It would help me throughout my career whenever I got this feeling, and it would help me make life-threatening, critical decisions. But right then, I was doing backflips in my head, Jerry. Lindsay had been offered a 15-year plea deal, but he turned it down for a trial. The judge commented to Lindsay just before sentencing him. Judge Chalaka said, "Mr. Lindsay, you are a strange person. I'm sentencing you today to 60 years in federal prison." The case was appealed in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York, and the court dismissed about 12 counts, Jerry, that appeared to be duplicative, but found the sentence of 60 years was correct and denied his appeal on all the other charges.
Wow.
Lindsay died in prison 10 years later from natural causes. Many people in the town of Whitehall believe that Lindsay might even still be alive and that he had changed places with another prisoner. They said that was Lindsay's style. That is how scared this town was of this man. Many people in the town also believed that Lindsay had been a hero, and they believed the stories he had sown in the past. Lindsay's intimidation and fear are still alive in Whitehall, even to this day, Jerry. And that's it.
Wow. Charlie, I have had another case. So we talked about stolen valor, and I've read numerous
Yes.
articles about stolen valor, but nothing like this.
Jerry, just one other thing I just wanted to mention. I have interviewed the assistant U.S. attorney who was in this case, Jack McCann, and his assistant U.S. attorney who assisted him during the trial. They both told me that this is probably the most dramatic case that either of them had. Maybe not the biggest case they ever had, but certainly the most dramatic. And it was certainly my most dramatic case that I have ever worked. When I was researching this, you won't believe this, I found Mr. Piatti. He had retired from the Army, and I found him and asked him if he would mind speaking to me about this case. He told me that this case is the only case that he kept records on. He said he put this into a plastic bag, all his notes about the trial and things like that, put it into a plastic bag, put the plastic bag in a briefcase, and put it in his garage 31 years ago or whatever. And he said, I don't know why I kept it. He said, but Charlie, he says, I'm glad you called me on this. He says, I have all the information that I testified to at the trial. When I met him, he was so helpful in explaining how Lindsay had falsified this thing. And this got all this information into his file. That was the most egregious effort at stolen valor that he had ever seen in his career. And I had spoken to a lady who investigates stolen valor and runs the POW campaign for citizens to identify prisoners or people who were using stolen valor as a tool. She had said she has never heard of anything like this because of having the original DD-214 as the official document. He didn't alter the DD-214. David Lindsay inserted all these citations into his personnel file himself. She told me after seeing the information that I had that she has never seen stolen valor to the extent that what this is. She has seen DD-214s manipulated and altered after they come out of military service, but she has never seen an official DD-214 that is part of the official records that have been altered to this extent, to have 20 valorous medals earned that were false and fraudulent.
This is amazing. And one of the things I want everyone to know is that you have given me copies of images of all of the medals that David Lindsay would have earned if his DD-214 was correct. And I'm going to have those photos in the show notes for this episode. Where did all those medals come from? Because it couldn't have been a trial exhibit because you didn't know all of that until the very last minute.
That's right, Jerry. I contacted a military medal company and I purchased every medal that was on his DD-214 and I displayed it, including the things he said about being a Ranger and a Green Beret and things like that. Those were all falsified, but those are what it would look like had he actually won them. I bought every medal that was on his record. It cost me about $1,000. I had to send them a copy of Lindsay's DD-214 before they would allow me to have copies of these. And they wanted to know what was the purpose. I had to prove that I was writing a book or doing something before they would authorize it.
Well, that is absolutely amazing. And I'm glad you did it because it really does give you the enormity of his lie when you see all of these medals posted there on the boards. Great idea. You use the word dramatic, and
Yes.
that's exactly how this case ended. And this is the type of thing that a great movie or book or TV show is made of. And I am just thrilled to hear that you are in the process of writing that book.
Well, Jerry, I'm happy that you just said that because I'm in the process of trying to write a book. I have someone assisting me. If that's an advertisement for anyone listening, I would love to get a contract with someone to either do a movie or series about this or help me to promote the book.
I hope somebody is listening that wants to move it to the next level. So congratulations. A fantastic case review. Thank you for sharing this part of your FBI story with us.
And thank you, Jerry, for giving me this great opportunity. I certainly greatly appreciate it.
We're at the part of the episode where I ask you when and why you joined the FBI. What's your story?
I was a state trooper. I was actually working on an undercover operation with the FBI and DEA out of Harrisburg. They were interested in identifying some intelligence from some motorcycle gangs. They had this ex-bandito, and I worked with him. We would go out and try to gather intelligence information about biker gangs in York and Lancaster and things like that. And I would have to write reports on it. When I wrote the reports and submitted them to the FBI agent, he said to me, wow, he says, Trooper, you write good reports. He says, did you ever think about the FBI? And I went, no, I didn't. So he said, oh, you have a degree? I go, I do. He says, and obviously you have experience. He says, that's all you need. Why don't you take the test? I said, I will. It took a while, Jerry, about a year or two, but I took the test. I passed, interviewed in Philadelphia, and I got my first assignment in Albany, New York, and Mr. David Lindsay came into my view.
As everybody knows, because I did read your bio at the beginning, you were able to have a very full and fascinating career. When did you retire?
I retired in 2008. I went to work for a Fortune 200 company as a security director. I stayed there for a while, and then ultimately I accepted a position at a quasi-governmental agency as the Homeland Security Director and Director of Security for this quasi-governmental agency that covered parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Jerry, I can say with some great glee that in October of this year, I retired totally, and I relocated to Thailand to retire. Now I play golf about 3 days a week and enjoy the comforts of being here.
And I understand from talking to you that the reason that you ended up in Thailand is that your current wife is from there and was able to convince you to take her back home.
Yes, she twisted my arm and I said, okay.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful place to retire.
It is. And again, Jerry, thank you so much.
To end the episode, I like to give my guest the last word. So what would you like to say?
Anyone who's out there thinking about the FBI as a career, it is the most fantastic. I'm sure that you've had many people, Jerry, speak about their FBI experiences. It was the most excitement and rewarding career that I could ever have hoped for. Gave me exposure to so many things and allowed me the opportunity to see how great the people who work in the FBI are and continue to be. They recruit and get the best. And it continues today, even though there's some difficulty with everything going on in the world. The FBI is still one of the greatest agencies in the world.
And that's the end of the interview. In your podcast app's description of this episode, you'll find a link to the show notes where you'll see a photo of Charlie Cunningham, David Lindsay, and those images of all the medals, emblems, and insignias that Lindsay claimed he earned and were on his DD-214 official military record. There are also links to newspaper articles about this case and information about stolen valor. I hope you enjoyed the interview and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. You can show me just how much you like the episode by buying me a coffee. There's a link in your podcast app's description of this episode, or you can go to my website and tap on the little coffee cup icon in the right-hand corner. Don't forget to follow FBI Retired Case File Review on your favorite podcast app. This podcast is all about true crime, but if you're also interested in crime fiction, once a month via my monthly email, I keep you up to date on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. When you join my reader team, you get access to my FBI reading resource, a colorful list of more than 70 books about the FBI, books written by FBI agents who have been guests on this podcast. nonfiction, crime fiction, true crime, and memoirs. You'll also get my FBI reality checklist of 20 cliches about the FBI. I would love it if you also checked out the link for my books. My FBI for Armchair Detectives nonfiction series enables readers to discover who the FBI is and what the FBI does, debunking misconceptions about the FBI, found in books, TV, and movies. And my Philadelphia FBI Corruption Squad procedural series features flawed female FBI agent Carrie Wheeler. My books are available as ebooks, paperbacks, and audiobooks wherever books are sold. And if you've already picked up copies, please consider leaving a review. Reviews help readers find good books. Thank you for listening to the very end, and I hope you come back for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams.